Today we have the 23 Indian Sport Chief versus the Harley Lowrider ST. And so if you're looking at one of these bikes, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about them, including the pros and cons, how they ride, and much more. And you may be surprised as to which one I like the best and why. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I got to say big thanks to American Biker here in Latson, South Carolina for letting me come out and test ride the Sport Chief. And then I also have a random viewer of mine who hit me up and asked me if I would like to ride the Lowrider ST. And that's the kind of community that we've built here for a viewer of mine to trust me with his $23,000 motorcycle. So big thanks to you guys. Big thanks to Tim and letting me take his bike out so I can enjoy it for at least a couple of hours. So let's go ahead and start with the similarities between the two bikes because there's not many of them and we can go through those things fairly quickly. They both have inverted front forks, 43mm tubes, although they are slightly different as far as the manufacturer. You got KYB on the Indian and you have, I believe, O-leans on the Harley. If I'm wrong on that, leave me a comment down below, but I'm fairly certain these are O-leans up front. They both have a 27-inch seat height, and they both have their exhaust on the one side, 2 into 2 exhaust. They also both have 19-inch wheels in the front and 16 in the rear. Now the Harley is rocking the Michelin Scorchers, which are excellent tires, and then the Indian has the Pirelli Night Dragons, which again are really good tires. And so as far as similarities, that's where it stops. We're going to start up here at the front and look at the fairings and the design aspects between the two bikes. All right, so let's start up front on the Harley. You have this big fairing, and it is a fixed fairing, by the way, and so that lends itself really well, or should, to a bike that will just kind of cut right through the wind. And you can tell the difference between the way Harley was going and the way Indian was going. Indian kind of wanted that sleek aesthetic design, whereas on the Harley they were going for a more functional fairing. And so you'll notice there's opening and vents in this fairing to allow some air to pass through, but it also should, in theory, cut better through the wind and be a little bit more stable on the highway. You also notice the lighting up front. So both bikes just have a singular headlight. Both of them are LEDs. I think the one on the Indian is a little bit better. It's the FTR light. And then of course, Indian has full LEDs. The Harley, guess what? They're still rocking the halogen turn signals up front. Now, the owner of this bike, he's already changed these up front, but they do come with halogens from the factory. Both bikes do have dual disc up front, by the way. That's one thing I forgot to mention. And both of them are Brembo, while the Indian is actually Brembo branded. The Harley Davidson is Harley branded, but it is a Brembo brake. Another thing that you will notice if we swap over to the Chief, first of all, your access to the headlight is much simpler because you don't have as much going on. But you'll notice, like when I'm just standing here, right, I can flat foot both motorcycles. And as far as my arms, this is where I am on the bike. And so my feet are right there. They're both mid-mounted controls, but they are wildly different in the way that they sit. And so on the Indian, I'm a little bit more stretched out, a little bit more hunched over the tank, if you will. But my feet and my legs, specifically my knees, are more comfortable. They're more forced down. On the Harley, again, I'm flat-footed. When I put my foot up on this peg, my knees are much higher than they are on the Indian. But the bars come back more to me on the Harley. So it's really interesting because, you know, they both have a similar rise, but because of the way they've positioned these bars, I'm a little bit more relaxed on this motorcycle in my arms, but I'm a little bit more crunched in my legs. So this is one complaint I had when I did a full review on this bike, and it still is one of those points of contention for me with this motorcycle. Another difference that you will notice is the tank. So the Harley actually has a 5-gallon tank. The Indian has a 4-gallon tank. They both have 6-speed transmissions, and when it comes to engines, they are about as close as you can get. The Harley has a 117 air and oil cooled. The Indian is a 116 Thunderstroke. And so what that equals to is 120 foot-pounds of torque, 125 foot-pounds of torque. The other thing I noticed on the Lowrider is the throttle response is instant. Interestingly though, when I get on the Sport Chief, there's a little bit more lag in the throttle until you turn it into sport mode. Once you put sport mode on the Indian, that lag completely goes away. And obviously sport mode wakes up the throttle, but it is a noticeable difference, especially when I rode the ST first and then the Sport Chief. Coming back to the rear, we have this solo seat on both bikes. Both of them are pretty firm, and you know, seats are one of those things that most people change anyways, but I will mention the factory seat here. They both have a nice hump to keep your butt planted. We actually did the regular Chief last week, and that one has more of a flat appearance, so when you hit that throttle, it acts like it wants to throw you off the bike. I don't have that problem with either one of these. And then of course we have the bobbed front and rear fenders. We have the tail light and brake lights that are integrated on either side. Side mounted license plate, of course. One of the nice things about the Indian is they actually have the piggybacks Fox shocks on this bike, and they really do a fantastic job. And both bikes, from what I noticed on the road, are pretty similar as far as the rear suspension. They tend to soak up a lot of the imperfections, and trust me, I live here in South Carolina. I know what imperfect roads are like, and both of these bikes do a pretty good job, but I really like the Fox shocks on this bike. They are way better than the standard shocks that you're going to get on a regular Chief. Another part of the Chief that I really prefer here is the center console. And so they give you that kind of gloss black, whereas the Harley, I keep calling it like a rhino lining or something. It's just got that flat appearance, but it has the texture of rhino lining almost. And then you also have the ride command. So the ride command I'm really impressed with, even in the 4-inch display, because you get weather updates, you get a lot of bike information, you obviously get your ride modes, you get your navigation, Bluetooth, whatever you want right here out of this one system. It is superior to what comes on the Harley. The Harley gives you a little 2.1-inch screen, little LCD screen. That's where all your information is. Everything's digital, including your tachometer, and I'm just not a huge fan of it. You know, I mean, every single motorcycle almost out there is coming with bigger and better screens, more information. This one gives you less. Not a fan at all. What I do like though is that you have a drop-in speaker system, and because of the size of this fairing, that's something that you can easily do, as opposed to having any kind of bar mounted speaker system. If that's something you want to put on your bike, the Rockford Fosgate, and I'm sure other companies make them as well, just drops right in. It's got your amp, it's got your tweeters, everything right there in one unit. That's pretty cool. Chopped fender up front, and then you have more of a full fender in the rear with the rear Zeppelin light, and again, that's LED, and you got your halogen turn signals there in the rear as well. So good old Harley Davidson. Now anybody that thought, man, this guy's wearing a Harley shirt, so I'm sure he's gonna choose the Harley. By the way, I did want to show y'all, I have a Indian shirt right underneath that, so it's completely fair here. I have no skin in the game, if you will. I'm just gonna tell you which one I like the best, and that's it. One thing I do like about the Harley, you have these clamshell style bags. And while aesthetically, you know, they're not as good as like a Street Glide Special or Road Glide Special or even the slam bags that Indian does, at least you have hard locking bags. That is something I would have to have, because you guys know I carry camera equipment. If you carry rain gear, if you know, whatever, having the ability to have these hard locking bags is really, really cool. And it's got like a performance bagger type of look to it. You have, of course, the bronze trim everywhere on the wheels, and then you got it right here on the intake. You got it on some of the bar and shields, so it's a really nice look. Something that I'm honestly a huge fan of. On the Indian, I looked it up. You can get The leather bags, they're kind of like that the hard plastic leather bags, so they're not going to provide as much security. And again, that's just one option that I looked up, but those were like $1,000. So this bike is right under 19 the way you see it. So even with $1,000, you're still coming in like 2,500 or $3,000 less than what you will a Harley Davidson Lowrider ST. GoPros are generally pretty good. They have some issues, but this was my issue, and that's why you're getting a voiceover. I forgot to plug in my microphone from my helmet to the GoPro. Apologies that we got to do the voiceover like this, man. It was totally my fault, and so all I had was wind noise. And so all in all, you know, both bikes did a fantastic job on the interstate. You know, and if you want to take these longer distances, I mean, people have done these on way less motorcycles, so you have plenty of power. I just think that the Lowrider ST would do a much better job straight from the factory. Plus, I don't like having music in my ears. I would prefer not to do that, even though I have a Bluetooth helmet. I would prefer to have it up there in the fairing and just play my music. So that's a really nice feature. I just find it pretty interesting how both motors respond when you rev them out a little bit more, where the Sport Chief has, you know, more vibration up through the rev range, or if you decide to ride that gear out a little bit longer, you're going to feel more vibration as opposed to the buttery smooth M8. Now, neither bike is set up for a passenger. No pegs, no mounts, no seat. So if you wanted to carry a passenger, the Lowrider feels like a bigger bike. You know, I don't know if it's just perception because it's got a bigger fairing, it's got the clamshell style bags or what, but it just feels bigger. So it may be a little bit better with a passenger, but like I said, neither bike is hurting for torque. And so if you wanted to put a passenger on both, it might be a little cramped compared to one of your bigger touring bikes, but at the end of the day, they're both going to have enough power to get both of y'all down the road. So after riding both bikes back to back, what do I think? It's interesting because the Sport Chief, I like the position of the pegs better, but the Lowrider, I like the position of the bars better. So the Sport Chief has more of a straight rise, and so I found myself a little bit more stretched out on that bike, whereas on the Lowrider, I was a little bit more comfortable. Motor-wise, I'll take the 117. Not only is that throttle super responsive, it feels like it's in sport mode all of the time. And while I like the idea of sport modes, you don't really need it with the 117. Not only is it super smooth, but it is super torquey and responsive. Speaking of that though, the little 2-inch display is, I don't even understand it. The ride command on the Sport Chief is superior. Also, another thing I didn't talk about is the shocks. Man, dude, the Sport Chief with the Fox shocks compared to the regular Chief I did not too long ago, premium, dude. Those shocks are fantastic. They absorb every little thing in the road. Interestingly enough, though, between that and the monoshock on the Lowrider, both bikes are really smooth as far as the suspension. They put the KYBs on the front suspension on the Sport Chief, and like I said, man, that bike compared to a regular Chief is much better. And so here's where I'm at with it. I think I like the Lowrider better. If I were to own this bike, I would have to put the forward control kit from Harley or somebody on that bike. It moves them like 7.5 inches forward of where they are now. But I would have to do less things on that bike to make it suitable for me than I would on the Indian. I like the functionality of the fairing. I like the way it looks. I'm not a huge fan of the way the clamshell bags look on the Harley, but I appreciate that they're there because, you know, if you're carrying, you know, camera equipment like I do or rain gear or whatever you carry, it's nice to just have that option. So it gives you more of like a performance cruiser type of look, and it's starting to grow on me. Again, the clamshells, they just, you know, at least they're hard locking bags, right? And you have some storage capabilities. And also the rise on the handlebars. I just think it's a better setup all the way around. It's nice that it comes with the traction control and the fact that you can just drop your Rockford Fosgate audio right there in the fairing. And for me, that just works out a little bit better. So I guess the only thing that I would have to do is figure out how to get that ride command on the Lowrider ST, because that thing is superior, man. I take that little 2-inch screen, and Harley can keep that, dude. I just, I understand they're going for like the simplicity or whatever. I just much prefer the functionality of the Ride Command. Both these bikes are great, man. I just like the Lowrider ST a little bit more. I'd love to hear your opinion, man. If you have one of these bikes or you're looking at getting one, what do you think about them? What's pulling you one way or the other? If you like this video, maybe you'll like one of these other comparisons I've done here recently. And if you want to, support us right here on the channel or on Patreon. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.